Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us here, and especially to our speaker, Dr. Ramesh Boonratana. Thanks for being so kind as to give us your time in our SciCasp International Lectures and Primatology Lecture Series, Past, Present, and Future Perspectives of the Field. So this will be the third installment of this lecture series. And as I just mentioned, we're really happy to have with us Dr. Ramesh Boonratana. And to get us started, I'd like to introduce or welcome Dr. Michael Huffman to come and give the introductions.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending. And a special thanks to Zimbo, or Ramesh Boonratana, as is on his email address, but he likes the name Zimbo, and I think most people around the world know him as Zimbo. So we'll go with that. I want to make you feel comfortable and very welcome. I'm extremely happy that you accepted our invitation. I think you have a lot to offer, and I'm sure that is reflected in all the people who have written and shown an interest in your talk today. Just as a general outline, because Zimbo is very modest and he probably won't talk so much about himself, but he's had a very extraordinary background. He did his bachelor's and his master's at Punjab University, where he started his primatological career studying rhesus monkeys, and then he did his PhD on I'm blocking here on proboscis monkeys. I was going to call them Jimmy Durante monkeys, but that's a different species. On proboscis monkeys in Sabah. But he's much more than a primatologist, as he will tell us all today. He's quite a conservationist, and he's well known throughout circles in Southeast Asia for his conservation work and his key efforts with the IUCN in Southeast Asia. He's outstanding in his field. And one other thing that I really appreciate is most of the time when I'm in contact with him, he's outstanding somewhere in the field or has just come back from the field. So he's very active in his work, and he takes good care of his students and his colleagues. And I think we'll hear more about that in the next hour. So I'll hand it over to you, Zimbo, and thank you very much for coming.
Okay, I'll just unmute myself and move my screen around a bit. All right, Sawadee krap, greetings from Thailand. Firstly, I would like to thank Mike, Andrew, and CSEP for inviting me to speak to the grad students. Although honestly, I kind of have mixed feelings about this. The Primate Research Institute of Kyoto University is one of the world's leading establishments in the field of primatology and home to many a great name. Hence, I'm kind of scratching my head as to how I can contribute to the students' learning. Well, since I don't think I can talk intelligently about primatology, therefore I will spend the next 40 minutes or so doing two things. Firstly, an explanation as to why I'm not a primatologist. And secondly, I wish to highlight some pointers and issues to consider when studying and practicing primatology. Now, when I go through the first bit, although I'll be narrating my association and disassociation with primatology, I want you to picture yourselves. I want you to reflect on your studies or your intended studies, your career paths, your personal goals, and your obligations as a primatologist. Okay, now let's proceed to understanding why I am not a primatologist. A short definition that I can find off the internet of a primatologist is a scientist who studies primates. Well, I have studied primates, that's true. I did my master's on rhesus macaques in India in the mid-80s under the supervision of Christopher James Edwin, and on the proboscis monkeys in North Borneo for my PhD. That was in the early 90s. It was the third long-term study on this unique species. The first two long-term studies were by Kerry Yeager in Kalimantan and Elizabeth Bennett in Sarawak. Liz Bennett was also my field supervisor. All right, soon after graduation, I was rather fortunate to be given an amazing opportunity to carry out a pioneering study on another odd-nosed columbine, the Tonkin snub-nosed monkey in Vietnam. This species was thought extinct until a rediscovery in 1992. Now, working in the steep karst limestone mountains of North Vietnam and months of rice and peanuts 3 times a day was indeed an experience. It also brought about my admiration for my Vietnamese colleagues and those who work and live in such a terrain. By the way, those photos of the Tonkin snub-nosed monkeys in the Geo magazine were the first ever photos of this species in the wild. Then, in between my master's and my PhD, and while writing up my doctoral dissertation, I was likewise fortunate to serve as a field assistant to Warren Brockelman, carrying out studies and surveys for the La and pileated gibbons in Thailand. Warren Brockelman was also my PhD supervisor. Now, besides this species, I have had other exposures to primates, but they were part of the broader biodiversity conservation projects. My other exposure to primates is helping to manage the Asian Primates Journal, a journal of the Primate Specialist Group. I think I've been with this journal for over a decade now. Besides playing the traditional role of a journal, this journal takes on another role, that is, developing the capacities of the early career primatologists, be it regarding their science or their written communication. By now, you might have started wondering, doesn't all this make me a primatologist? Well, yes and no. All right, besides studying primates, I also serve as a field assistant to Alan Rabinowitz on his project studying the carnivore community in Western Thailand in the late 80s. Then I carried out my own studies on the Sumatran rhinoceros, Asian elephant, and banteng in North Borneo in the mid-90s. However, now the Sumatran rhinoceros is no longer around. And the populations of Asian elephants and bantengs have now dwindled precariously. It deeply saddened me that my findings and recommendations were ignored. Besides studying these mega herbivores, I have also carried out various general wildlife surveys. So did I move away from primatology by studying the mega herbivores? Yes, it was an intentional decision. Why, you may ask? Well, because I did not want to be labeled a primatologist. Now, do not get me wrong. I do enjoy studying primates, and primatology is a noble discipline. But I was also interested in studying and conserving other species. And there's a tendency for doors to be closed once people place you in a box. Besides the mega herbivores and several other wildlife surveys, I have gone undercover and carried out investigations into international wildlife and forest crimes. Those photos of whole and sawn timber that you see are just a glimpse into the massive international operation involving many players, including corrupted individuals from government agencies across a few countries. These works were not part of my plans to move away from primatology. They were opportunities that were simply there. And probably there was no one mad enough wanting to take up the assignments. Anyway, several other opportunities and challenges came along the way. I began working in protected area management and natural resources co-management. I also made my mark as a trainer, carrying out on-the-job training and capacity development of protected area staff and other partners, which included the Army, Border Police, militia, and the indigenous groups. Also for grad students and early professionals. As I built up my experience and expertise, I was frequently hired to provide technical advice to projects and programs associated with hydropower development, policies, laws and legislations, resource use, essentially anything dealing with biodiversity conservation and ecosystem protection, including assessments of the ASEAN Heritage Parks nominations. Now, my story gets somewhat weirder. Excuse me. Despite having no training in the tourism sector and not even any initial thoughts about it, yet I have contributed to the development of ecotourism, community-based tourism, and responsible tourism. And I have been invited to deliver training workshops. The trainees were mostly from government tourism agencies and businesses wanting to venture into these tourism niches or strengthen their products. I have had participants from ASEAN, Gulf countries, Latin America, and Africa. And the funny bit is that I get invited to give talks on various topics and issues that are somewhat a surprise even to me, including one at the World Spa and Wellbeing Congress. Nevertheless, it was fun giving such talks, especially when someone else pays for my airfares, the fancy hotels and foods, and the sightseeing. Something unimaginable for someone who has spent much of his life getting drenched and muddied in the rainforests of Asia. Nevertheless, if you had noticed, there are some common denominators underlying my tourism adventures. Moreover, my venture into tourism is also reinforced by a need to bridge tourism and conservation. It is quite ridiculous to go to conferences on protected areas and conservation and hear talks about tourism promotion in protected areas as a means to conserve biodiversity and protect ecosystem from people who have no idea about product development and marketing. It is equally ridiculous to go to tourism conferences and hear talks from people who think ecotourism comprise elephant rides and monkey feeding. Anyway, if you think dipping my toes in tourism is crazy, then wait till you hear my next adventure. Laudato si, mi signore. Now you must be wondering, what is he talking about? Laudato si, on the care of our common home, is the second encyclical of Pope Francis. Written in 2015, it carries the Pope's criticisms on consumerism and irresponsible development. He further laments environmental degradation and the climate crisis, and calls on the world's human population to take urgent and unified actions. So how do I fit in? The Franciscan nuns of Kota Kinabalu, perchance, attended a public talk I was giving, and we got to chatting after that. They were tasked to implement actions and activities of Laudato Si. However, there were certain aspects that are beyond their scope. Laudato Si is basically about biodiversity conservation, ecosystem protection, climate emergency, sustainable development, indigenous peoples, livelihoods and food security, adaptation and mitigation, among other things. Those things are right up my alley. So that's how I started working with the Franciscan nuns and the Catholic youths of Sabah. We basically share a common goal. I have the expertise, they have the platform. In addition, the beneficiaries are not only the Catholics, but everyone from all faiths and walks of life. Hence, this is indeed one of the best opportunities that came my way as a conservation practitioner. Moreover, the Franciscan nuns are some of the most wondrous people I have ever met. By the way, I'm not a Catholic. But to achieve sustainable conservation, diversity in ethical and cultural outlooks toward nature and human life is strongly encouraged. Therefore, one must promote relationships that respect and enhance diversity of life, regardless of political, economic, or religious ideologies. So you can probably see by now that I'm willing to work with any group of people. Anyway, because of my experience with this work, I introduced just last year a new general education course for the undergrads titled Faiths, Ecological Justice, and the Tropical Rainforest. It highlights the issues that tropical rainforests and indigenous peoples face and the features of religions and beliefs, both mainstream and indigenous, that contribute to biodiversity conservation and human well-being. Now, let's get back to what I meant by I'm not a primatologist. So by this definition of a primatologist and this definition of a scientist, plus all the things I'm involved with, I cannot claim to be a true primatologist. Heck, I don't even produce enough research papers as scientists should. But I guess I'm a bit of everything, hence a primatologist plus plus. Just as someone who will use whatever means and tools to achieve conservation and human well-being whenever and wherever the opportunities arise. Who knows, I might be your next Phantom of the Opera or a male model for adult diapers. So what about you? What kind of primatologist do you want to be? Field-based, lab-based, research-based, or conservation-oriented? Well, if you're planning to be a field primatologist, then good luck. Research is just half of it. You spend the other half wet and hungry as a laborer, a cook, clearing trails and rivers, fighting leeches and mosquitoes, or simply trying to stay alive. In 1995, I became famous for the wrong reasons, hosting 3 malarial strains at the same time. And in 1996, my career as a field scientist came to a temporary halt. By the way, these are nothing compared to what other colleagues have experienced. Nevertheless, a field primatologist is always outstanding. Outstanding in the rains, glaring sun, storms, and so on. Then comes the next question. Does one need to be a primatologist to save primates? No, not necessarily. There are many ways to conserve primates. Good ecotourism or responsible tourism providers are highly successful at spreading awareness and educating the public, while simultaneously generating funds for environmental protection. Do you know that these eco-businesses can have more impact than scientific publications in high-impact journals? They are apparently more effective in converting people to care for the environment. By the way, some of them have very interesting background. Some were previously white-collar professionals who decided to pack it in for lesser incomes, simply because they care for the environment and society. Give me a second. Besides this, be a nature illustrator or photographer. Dao Wan Heng's works capture the beauty of nature and bring life to the animal subjects. His works of art are like looking at the animal versions of Mona Lisa. The photographer, Seth Prudente, has an interesting history. I met him during my second year of my PhD fieldwork. He was then a nature guide. During his free time, he would join me in the field or just come over to the camp for a chat. To his credit, he was intellectually curious, asking many questions about the proboscis monkey and other wildlife, and whenever he came across subject matter experts. And now, he's quite an expert on Borneo's wildlife. Anyway, after his exposure with international wildlife photographers in his early days as a nature guide, he saved and bought his first professional camera. After that, there was no stopping him. Besides being a renowned nature photographer, he also now runs specialized photography trips. He is much sought after by international photographers and filmmakers to facilitate their projects, including big names like Richard Attenborough. So people like him and Dao Wan Heng are actively contributing to conservation through their passion. What about you? You wish to be a primatologist? You can. But there are certain obligations, all right? There are certain obligations that you need to fulfill as a primatologist, whether you study in the field, in enclosures, in the labs, you have an obligation to help conserve your study animals and habitats. Now, a lot of people who study primates think they are by default conserving primates. They are not. It is imperative that you highlight the statuses of your study animals, especially those who will be studying primates in the field. Even if your research is focused on, say, social behavior. Most readers are aware of the species conservation status only from the IUCN rate list. but the IUCN rate list gives the species status across its global range. We need to have a better understanding at the site level. Some populations may be more critical than the global population, and losing any one of them will have severe ramifications on the species' global status. I have seen so many papers that have failed to do so, or they may give a token mention of the species' global status. Do you realize that these papers are intentionally causing more harm? They tend to give the impression that everything with their study animal is all right. And before you know it, the population has crashed. Some do mention the threats to the species, but not enough. It is not enough just to say habitat loss or hunting. If we are going to conserve the primates, we need to know and understand the type and nature of those threats. For this, I highly recommend using the IUCN CMP Unified Classifications of Threats. This classification is a standard and precise lexicon for biodiversity conservation. It is an effective tool for identifying and classifying the immediate threats to primates and their habitats. Let's take a look at this example. I have highlighted two common threats to primates, agriculture and hunting. But note that while hunting directly impacts the primates, agriculture impacts the primates by putting stress on the primate habitats. Therefore, correctly identifying the threats can effectively guide the prioritization of threats and conservation responses. However, if the drivers of those threats are not identified and addressed, then those threats are very likely to persist. Thus, it also helps in understanding the underlying causes that drive the threats. In this example, climate crisis, failing crops, and poverty drives agricultural encroachment into primate habitats. Simultaneously, one driver can drive another or more. Here we have the climate crisis as the underlying cause of failing crops. And failing crops, be it due to climate crisis or other reasons, will serve as the drivers of poverty. Thus, identifying and understanding their drivers can better assist in the development of appropriate mitigation measures. Simply put, we need to know the details. So maybe now you understand a bit better why conservation efforts have made little progress. What about data recording and reporting? Now, isn't this the norm for primatologists? Yes and no. I'm not talking about faking data. That's pretty clear-cut a no-no. I'm talking about the exclusion of vital information. In our pursuit of gathering information on normal behaviors of primates living in their wild natural habitats, there is a chance that we ignore, either accidentally or incidentally, those ecological variables that can influence the study animal's behavior, especially those that fragment the habitats, such as roads, rails, canals, and power cables. Also, the consequences of this linear infrastructure, such as edge effects, disease transmission, vehicle collision, electrocution, and so on. And even large forested habitats are, in reality, fragments of an even larger former contiguous landscape. So in reality, although the behaviors of the study animals are reported normal, they are normal in response or shaped by those variables. Hence, it is essential to give detailed descriptions of the habitats. Otherwise, readers will be misled into thinking that the behaviors reported are the expected normal. It is also quite funny to see some field researchers collecting data as if they are working in the office. They proceed to the site after sunrise, return to camp for lunch and a siesta, and then return to the site to continue their data collection. It is little wonder that the activity budgets of the study animals are biased. There is a study where this researcher observed his animals only in the mornings and evenings, because that's when it's convenient for him to see the study animals. However, his analysis of the activity budget was reported as observations from dawn to dusk, and his findings showed that his study animals had a sex life that would put even rabbits to shame. Now, other than that, researchers today are very fortunate to have many modern tools to assist them with their research, such as data loggers, drones, GPSs, GIS, and remote infrared photographic equipment. But careless reliance on such technology can yield erroneous results. I'll give you 2 examples. There was a researcher who spent the whole day video recording his study animals. Then he would spend hours doing meticulous behavioral observations from those recordings. What's wrong with this, you may ask? Well, most of it should be okay. But there were times when the focal animal's behaviors were triggered by some other individuals or species or events that were outside the camera frame. Hence, without considering these external influences, the researcher erroneously analyzed and interpreted his observations. The second example, unfortunately, is not uncommon. Researchers using GPSs frequently transfer onto maps their own locations instead of the locations of the study animals. It probably does not make much difference if one is within a few meters of the study animals and in a homogeneous environment. But if the study shows that animals are almost permanently sticking to the roads or trails, then something is definitely not right. Sometimes all you need is a pen and a notebook, a good pair of binoculars, a good pair of eyes, and perseverance. Now let's take a look at another common issue. Grad students, young researchers, and early career primatologists are all eager to make their mark, but sometimes a bit over-eager. Frequently, I come across papers that say, this is the first study, blah, 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 blah. Well, some are accurately so. Some are ambiguous. Some are downright insulting. And some even avoided citing earlier studies of the same species, the same aspects, or even at the same study sites. So be very specific as to what you mean by the first study. Once published, you have to live with it. On a related note, I'm reminded of a field assistant during my PhD fieldwork. He sort of went around telling people that I was his field assistant. Later, he gave interviews talking about the proboscis monkey study as his own and conveniently left me out of the picture. While on the same issue, I have seen papers that belittle earlier studies, especially of those carried out decades earlier. Yes, you should compare your findings with those of the earlier researchers, but you also have an obligation to postulate why the findings are different or why the earlier studies were flawed, instead of just stating that the earlier researchers were erroneous. Duration, seasonality, methodology are all possible causes. And mind you, these pioneers face a lot of challenges that are not highlighted in their publications. Little funds, uncharted grounds, hardly any information of the primates to be studied, untested methodology, none of the fancy hardware and software we see today, aggressive poachers and raids by pirates, and so on. These pioneers laid the foundations, and we are all standing on the shoulders of these giants. Likewise, seasoned primatologists also have their obligations to fulfill, which we are all aware of. But there's something I wish to highlight that I'm not happy about. There are among senior scientists that have narcissistic tendencies. Besides being obsessed with themselves, they have made it a vocation to belittle others, in particular towards their junior colleagues and grad students. Some even go to the extent of taking credit for the works of others, sabotaging their proposals, or even to tearing them down. As senior scientists, we are the foundation. We are not to compete with them or be jealous of their works. Instead, we should be ensuring that they achieve more than us. We should be assisting them towards their goals and take pride and joy in their successes. Now, let's look at other obligations. Do acknowledge and highlight the contributions of your local counterparts and field assistants. It will help them along their career paths and their contribution to conservation. Moreover, your research will not be possible without them. Also, confer with them the local sociocultural norms before embarking on any course of action. I know of cases of projects failing because of the researchers' ignorance or arrogance. If you look at the photo on the left, the gentleman in the middle was my local counterpart, and the gentleman on the left was our field assistant. After enduring the joys and pains of fieldwork, we remain great friends today. And if you look at the photo on the right, that gentleman started on my project as my driver. He came with the four-wheel drive I rented for a project I was running in Laos. He was part of the deal. Later, he became my field assistant. He was so good that he finally became my trainer assistant. Likewise, we remain good friends today. What about indigenous peoples? Do acknowledge their traditional or ecological knowledge. Their observations are frequently uncannily accurate, although the same is not necessarily true of their interpretation of the observations. But significantly, incorporating their traditional resource use practices into modern species and habitat management systems frequently yield desirable outcomes. A word of caution though, when working in areas where indigenous peoples threaten or impact the primates and their habitats, please make an extra effort to offer justifiable and amicable solutions in your write-ups. Simply stating that these people threaten the primates may result in these already marginalized societies being displaced. Moreover, it can also open up to undesirable consequences, such as an opportunity to some corrupted government-approved resource extraction and mega development projects. To wind up, I have a few takeaway messages to the grad students. You do not have to end up a primatologist just because you study primatology. You can be anything, as long as you have the passion and commitment for it. And you can still contribute to primatology. You can be an environmental lawyer, an actor, a filmmaker, a consultant, running a green business or running an NGO, work in a development bank or other international organizations. You may even become a prime minister or president. Man, I would love to see that happen. Or you can be a primatologist plus. So no matter what and where you end up doing, your primatology training is still important. Primatology can be a gateway to many other wondrous opportunities, but you have to dare to dream. I'm sure you have always heard people saying, follow your dreams. Well, that's only part of it. Most of us don't even dare to dream. Also, it does not mean that you will have to keep following the same dream throughout your life. With new circumstances and new opportunities come new dreams. Dreams are not destinations. They are journeys. So dare to dream. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was really nicely done and very informative. I'm sure everybody here is really appreciative to have had that time, and anybody following along on YouTube as well. So I would like to open the floor for anybody that might have questions for Zimbo. Yeah, we can do this. Usually takes a few minutes to warm up here, so we can do this by people typing in the chat, or just put up your hand in Zoom so that I can flag you down, and you can go ahead.
Maybe my incoherent ramblings was too incoherent. Too incoherent.
I think it was very, very coherent, very coherent.
Crystal clear, crystal clear.
I was hoping that the students can draw some common denominators across what I've been rambling about.
No doubt. Well, if I can get us started, if you don't mind, then, because I was kind of curious, something you said in the first part of the talk, where when you were talking about being involved with a lot of different communities and groups for conservation, and you talked about this Catholic group in Sabah. And I find that interesting because, well, first of all, I don't know how large the community of Catholics in Sabah is. I myself do also work in Sabah. And I'm wondering if you could maybe share a little bit about what kind of activities they're focused on then, and also what kind of sphere of influence they might have for conservation locally in Sabah as a minority religion.
It's not a minority
Okay,
religion.
or whether it's not a minority. Yes, you can clarify.
How many Catholics are there on this planet? All right, I'll respond to your question, your curiosity, I would say. Now, this Laudato Si instruction from the Pope is across the globe to all Catholics. And if you look at the history of the Pope, he's worked with Indigenous for a long time. He's very closely associated with them. And Saint Francis of Assisi, right, a saint that was involved with nature. So the Franciscan nuns are very much into nature, all right? So anyway, so as I mentioned in the slide, it was just pure chance, but for me, it was a golden opportunity, all right? Before I go into the actions and the activities, let me ask you a question. Or anyone in the Zoom, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to conservation? What is the biggest hurdle to conservation? I think probably you got the hint. Anyone? I won't see the chat, so maybe you can turn on the mic and
we can do a Zoom poll. Biggest hurdle for conservation.
Now that'll take a long time. I just want one word, 1 or 2 words from someone.
It's human behavior. Human behavior.
Okay, you say people.
It's human behavior, yeah.
Human behavior. Anything else? One more. Just let's do one more. Anyone? Kenneth, what comes to your mind? I can see you.
I was about to say short-term interests.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Often when we talk about conservation, people always say that, oh, we lack money, we lack human resources, blah, blah. That's rubbish. We've had more resources than we used to have in the past. Ask Wolfgang, he worked with no money in the distant past. But why do we still have the same problem? Because you mentioned people, you mentioned human behavior, you say short-term interest. It boils down to attitude. This is the biggest obstacle, right? So I've been waiting for this opportunity. I mean, I would love to get a platform, I keep telling myself. And then suddenly the Franciscan nuns were there. They have a very large platform. I mean, they themselves in Sabah, but Laudato Si is across the globe. So here am I working with the majority of Sabahans, because most Sabahans are Catholic. But then Sabahan is multicultural and they are stronger in terms of their culture rather than religion. So people tend to, in one family, you can have a Muslim, a Christian, a Hindu in the same family, and they get along very well. Andrew, you've been in Sabah, so you know. So yeah, so basically there were a couple of things in the Laudato Si, in the encyclical. So the nuns were thinking that, well, maybe we're just planting roses and planting trees. Well, that's just part of it. When I was given a chance to go through the encyclical, we designed the actions and activities. So we did it in phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so that they don't get overwhelmed, because it's something totally new for them, right? So unfortunately, we got interrupted last year because of the COVID. So now everything is a bit online. So things are still going on, but a bit weaker. I'm supposed to go back there and contribute. So some of the things we do will be, say, I look for the talents within the group that wanted to volunteer the services. There was one gentleman who was doing composting. That's part of Laudato Si, reducing the chemicals that we use that's destroying the habitat. We talk about agroforestry, right? Because if you don't address livelihoods, then the other part of conservation will be very difficult. So this is how I work in. So although initially it was already overwhelming to them, but they managed to do it. And then we're still waiting for the next phases that I've yet to open up to them. And then we also got some individuals who have little patches of forest. But those little patches of forest happen to be critical wetlands or watershed area. So we're going to do activities there. And they have given me a center that they've used for the normal training, but whatnot. It has accommodation, it has a lot of space. So we are converting that center to an educational center. So it'll be an awareness center, educational center, demonstration site. So people can come and enjoy the cool environment, learn, get healthy products from the nuns and from the communities nearby. So we're talking about changing people. That's what I mean by changing attitude. While addressing their needs, what do they need? A better life, human well-being. So those are the things. I mean, I can go into maybe the next 6 hours because it took me 7 days just to do the training on this. I hope that answers you a bit, maybe.
No, it's great. Thank you.
All right.
I mean, I'm always fascinated and interested to see different kinds of, I guess we can call them collaborations, because there's so many different things that can be done for good by involving different communities. Right. So yeah, thank you.
I mean, and for the people out there, especially the young people, don't think that, hey, I've got to have a large platform. Well, I've worked with one person change, that's good enough. Whenever and wherever you get opportunities. I've had a village headman in Vietnam in 93 coming up to me on the last day that we were at camp and told me that, well, I've told my people, this was an indigenous tribe, I've told my people they should not hunt this animal anymore. The species was safe. We didn't do much. We just chatted, busted our livers from time to time, which comes along with field primatology. You have to have strong liver. So one person changed, but that one person changed others. But nevertheless, it just takes, if you're happy changing one person, if you have the opportunity to change one person, do it. I can go on.
Well, let's see if we have any other questions from anybody in Sanjana.
Do I see her in the screen?
Yeah, here she is.
Oh, in the corner there. Oh.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk, Dr. Zimbo. So mine is also a question more out of curiosity. So when you started off working in the field, did you think that one day your topics would, or your career would go in so many different paths?
Good question. Very simple answer. No. I was clueless, but I was adventurous.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I did not know what I was going to do until I started looking at the macaques. I mean, when I started looking at macaques, it changed my life. It was changed my personal life. My story is a bit strange. It changed my personal life because all my life, growing up until my early 20s, I felt hopeless. I was not good in sports. I was not good in music. Right? Whenever I sing, the cats will, drop dead and whatnot. So I was hopeless in everything. I was bad in my studies. Right? I was average to below average. So I was kind of depressed until I came across the macaques. The macaques, I could see things that the average person could not see. I saw interactions, I saw behavior. And when looking at the behavior, I saw myself, not in the macaque, but in their behaviors, in their interaction, and realized, hey, what's been wrong with me? What's wrong with my relationship with others? Because macaque is a highly social animal, right? You've seen macaques there in Japan. They are highly social. So it taught me several things. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to be a primatologist. But then I went, over time, I said, I want to be a conservationist. And people were blocking me. And people block me, I get angry because anger is the only thing that drives me. I mean, different people may have different drivers. For me, it's anger. But I channel my anger into work. So my anger, okay, since you say, well, I will remember one UN consultant he said, oh, this guy can't be studying elephants. He knows only monkeys. That was a challenge. I took up that challenge. And I did it. I mean, maybe not perfectly, but I did it. Okay, maybe that helps. So I'm still open, like I mentioned. Next time we meet, maybe you'll see me on the stage singing Phantom of the Opera or Phantom of the Primates or something.
So next time we need to get Dr. Zimbo to do something important, we make him angry about not being able to do it. Let him
No, I
know.
mean, it's all about dealing with, I don't know, there is no perfect advice, but you have the answers in yourself, right? The answers within you. When you look at others, like that's why I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that although I've been narrating, but reflect yourself, picture yourself. Don't wait. What can you do now? What can I do now? I'm stuck with COVID in my room of 4 walls. What can I do right now? You're very lucky. You people have access to social media and you're not using it. Use it, right? The first computer I touched was when I was, 28 or 27. The first time I saw a computer in my life. And I saw internet maybe in my late 30s. No, wait, hang on. Yeah, mid 30s, late. Yeah. I said, but you have the tools now. And I've seen my undergrads, they're brilliant, they're innovative. I give them an assignment. I say, okay, these are the guidelines, go and change the attitude. They come up with nice stories, nice clips, nice dramas. They're more adventurous, they're more brilliant. So yeah, look around you. What can I do right now? Don't wait. And don't start thinking about, I want to do this big thing and I can only do it when I have enough money or when I have my PhD. No, do it right now. Don't wait. PhDs, masters are for those people who are very poor in their thinking. That's why we have to go to school. Right? If you're brilliant, you don't have to go to school. But some of us, like me, I was not brilliant. That's why I went to school to get trained. Okay, maybe I spoke more than I should.
I like this new way of thinking about it. Yeah, good. Any other questions in here in Zoom from anyone?
You've got a couple comments from people who are on your YouTube. Can you read those chat messages?
Mike, I'm gonna get
my
Nahogo.
YouTube, my internet is off.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Zimbo,
Okay.
we're gonna get
my Google Chrome.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the YouTube comments and questions in a moment. I just want
Okay.
to finish up in
Thanks.
Zoom if anyone has any other questions or comments.
I just wanted to modify your title. You're not just a primatologist. You're so much more, but you're still, the primate in you is shining through.
That's why the plus plus.
Right.
Just like red plus plus, you see, primatologist plus plus. That's what I want everyone to do. Whether you end up having the position of a primatologist or not, it doesn't matter. But you are primatologist plus plus because you're training. Look at Tony Whitten. Tony Whitten was working in the bank. He studied primates. Right? He was in the environmental sector, and of course, sadly, he passed away. Then he later on ran NGOs. How many heads of NGOs had primatology background? Had or have? You can check. Yep. Any question? Or too mind-boggling?
While the people in Zoom here are maybe thinking a little more, Nahoko-san, you're there. Maybe you can give us the comments and questions from YouTube so that we can get to some of those.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Go slowly and read short question. My brain doesn't work as well as before.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for your very nice presentation. And I was checking the comment and question on YouTube, and there are a lot of nice comments from Singapore and Malaysia and around the world. So we'll send you all the comment to you later. And there is a question about the extinction of primate. The question is that what are the impact of primate in their habitat? How would the habitat be impacted if some or any or all of the primate species become extinct?
I think everyone can answer that. There is one primate, if it goes extinct, will be doing very well. That's the Homo sapiens. But other than that, primates, like every other organism on this planet, whether we find use in them or not, they have a value. If they don't have a value, they won't be there in the first place. They've taken years, millions of years, or billions of years to evolve, right? So what I'm going to say about primates apply to many other animals and non-animals, plants. For example, primates are pollinators. Primates are also seed dispersers. Not the same primate, but we're talking about these are the role of the primates. Seed dispersers, pollinators, they are seed predators. Seed predators are also good because they help in pruning the plant and come up with a higher yield. And one more thing that we should be thinking of now with the climate crisis is that if our non-human primates cannot survive the stress that's ongoing, then chances we will also disappear from this planet as humans, because primates make very good ecological model, especially the more resilient and common primates. People should be studying them, all right? At one time, we were all looking for the most critically endangered animal, critically endangered habitat to study. And, you know, it's exciting when you do your PhD, you look for the rarest species, the most difficult habitat, you make your big name. But now, with climate crisis, you need to reorient your study towards the more common species. And what's the most common species, primate species? Macaques, especially the ones that are in degraded habitats. They are surviving, but how long? So maybe we should be studying them right now. Those primates in degraded habitat that are just hanging by the thread, and see how do they cope with the change? What are the variables involved? And maybe we can learn from that and talk about adaptation and mitigation in climate crisis for us, because at the end of the day, it's all about us. So when you study primates or study any species, if you want to convince your audience, your target audience, you have to link it to the human aspect, whether you like it or not. I don't like humans, but you still have to link it. And maybe link it, if you have a smaller target group, as say politicians or businessmen, study them. Study what do they need. Readapt. We cannot be arrogant. This is my monkey. I study my monkey. You must love my monkey. That's what we do, right? We're so proud of our study animal that we forget how others see it, how the farmers whose crops have been raided by the monkeys see it. So we have to look from their point of view and then see, is there any amicable ways to go around solving it? I think I've gone beyond. The question was about the value of primates. Bad habit, sorry.
I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Nahugo, I think that was the only question we had, right, from you two.
Yeah.
Why
And
people don't love me, or what? No one wants to ask me any question?
you do. You have so many. You have a lot of fanfare in YouTube here with a lot of comments, as Nahugo said, from Malaysia, from Kalimantan, from Singapore, from Malaysia. So.
Okay, then throw me something we can chat about.
Yeah, we have another couple.
Let's get
minutes
from
if
the
anyone else
students
here.
in the Zoom.
Yeah. Okay, Kenneth.
Yeah, I wanted to have a personal opinion of yours, because I really appreciated your rambling. It was very, very fascinating rambling. And you mentioned very, very difficult issues like climate crisis and extinction in general. And as you mentioned, you can look at primates through the lens of many things, including conservation and so on. How do you, I was wondering if you ever felt that all of this could lead to some pessimism in your work and in studying primate plus in general.
Wow. Well, we all go, if you look at this, Mike, Andrew, Wolfgang, Vernon, we've all gone through our ups and downs. I mean, there were several times in my, say, late 20s, 30s, early 40s, you feel like throwing everything away. And you want to give up because it's honestly, it's based, conservation is simply pushing sloppy shit uphill. Right? So that's being honest. But then when you look back again, then you look at, in my case, I look at myself, what drives me? What am I if I'm not doing conservation? I'm nothing. I said, I could do other things, but will I be happy? Maybe not. Maybe I'll be rich and unhappy. I don't know. But this is what made me. And the other thing that drove me, or still driving me, is that I'm simply the right person at the right place at the wrong time. And I look left, I look right, there's hardly anyone around. So I just have to do it. When there's no one else to do it, I just do it. So it becomes maybe of an automaton in a way, but then, yeah, you just do it. And then you get little joys from some little success here and there. I mean, and the failures become your lessons learned. Right? And you just keep on doing. I mean, that's the way I push myself. I won't say I push myself anymore. Well, not true also, I still push. So yeah, there's hardly anyone doing this kind of work, right? So you just do it. And maybe I'm a bit greedy. When I see opportunities, I just do it. Or the other thing I do is I'm a matchmaker. I'll be maybe talking to you today. Some weeks later, some months later, some years later, I may talk to someone else, probably from a different field altogether, and suddenly two things click, and I start communicating and say, okay, why don't you guys get together? A tourist provider, donor, and so on. Yeah, I enjoy doing that matchmaking. Anything else from the student?
In the interim, we have a nice comment on YouTube. It's hello from Thailand. We love you a lot. Miss your class, Dr. Ramesh.
Those must be those people who mess up my life.
He didn't mean that on YouTube. He didn't really mean that.
They know me.
Well, you can take, if there's anyone has one last question or comment, we can take it. Otherwise, we're just past our 6 o'clock here.
I've got just one comment, and maybe we can talk about it offline, because I'd like to make a match for you and some other people. But I was really interested in your timely discussion about how to interact and to help Indigenous people that you work with, not just our field assistants, but sometimes the Indigenous people around us give us so much information about what that we wouldn't have been able to comprehend on our own. And I'll be involved in a discussion group next month about that topic. People in India have come together and have written a short article, but it would be interesting to know just even one example that you have, how in Indigenous knowledge, lek or traditional ecological knowledge, as some people call it, how that has inspired or changed the direction, or brought something to the forefront that you weren't aware of before.
Okay, I have to go back a bit in history. When I was working in Borneo, it was middle of the forest, very far from human society. So it was all forest and wildlife. Then when I went to Vietnam and Laos, things started changing. All right, there were a lot of indigenous peoples around, and they were not doing too well, but they were very lovely people. They're very warm. So it started changing my mindset about conservation. Then as I spend more time with these people, there I realized one of the bigger, because the objective is only one thing, to do conservation. That was my task, that was my terms of reference. But how do I do conservation? Because the moment we enter an area, the moment the people here or conservationists, they're the bad people. They always tell us, don't do this and don't do that. Because I've been working on this ICDPs, that's an Integrated Conservation and Development Project, which is all drama. People love the development group because we're going to build bridges for you and whatnot. Anyway, so going back to your question, one of the things I did over time through getting close to them and understanding how can we get people to do conservation. And that boils down to what we mentioned earlier about attitude and a target audience. And when I talked to some indigenous groups, they say that, well, why should I care? And they have every reason to say that. It doesn't belong to me. Why doesn't it belong to them? Because it was there. They had their own system, maybe not perfect, until the government came in and declared that this belongs to the government. This is a protected area. They have lost all their rights. So why should I care? It's the tragedy of commons. So what did I do? I started talking to the shaman, to the elders, and asked them, do you have any beliefs? Do you have any past practices, blah, blah? So gathered all this information, molded them together, put in science into that, and came up with simple rules and regulations. For them, I started with one village, one community, right? Work with them, but of course, there must be trust. You must spend a lot of time. There's me trust building. So draw up this simple rules and regulation meant for the community. So get them to ignore the protected area rules and regulation and get them to take care of the resource. So it's no longer conservation, but it's resource use management. So resource use management based on their past practices and science. And I made a challenge to them. But of course, we do these challenges after we got really close. I told them, okay, let's try these rules and regulation. If it doesn't work, you can go and hunt every animal that you want, eat every animal that you want. And the rules and regulation about resource use management was very simple. Let's say, for example, in this community in Laos, what was their main source of protein? Fish and frogs. Contrary to all the textbooks saying that wild meat is opportunistic. In Laos, maybe in other parts of Southeast Asia. But here was fish and frogs. Okay. But there was a problem. They were running out of fish. They were running out of frogs because of tragedy of commons. They were using poison. They were using bomb explosive. They were harvesting in wrong places and so on. So we started making conservation pools where you can harvest, what you can harvest, how you can harvest, what tools can you use, who can harvest. And in the end, basically the villagers guarded their resources better than anyone else, better than protected areas. Why? It's their livelihood. And my challenge to them, as I mentioned earlier, I said, okay, let's try it for 5 years because I was expecting the fish to come back in 5 years because they had to walk 10 kilometers to get fish about this size, teeny little fish. That's 10 kilometers. I told them, okay, let's try for 5 years. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, you can whack every animal that you want. And 3 months later, I came back to the village and the villager that was working with me came and picked me up from this boat landing, another village. And he said, Achan, we got a surprise for you. And I said, oh, wow, you must have seen some dukes because they always know that, they know I love animals. And I always make it known that I love to see science and tracks. And they're excited to tell me stories because it's something new in their life, something exciting. They said, no, we're not going to tell you yet. So after a full day of boat ride through the rapids, after 2 hours of hiking to their village, we went to the village all dirtied and muddied. And in the school field, a tiny little school, there were 6 jars of rice wine. Big, massive rice wine. He said, Achan means teacher. Achan, that's for you. The fish has come back. it's right at our doorstep. I was expecting 5 years for nature to recover. But mind you, look at the COVID for the last, almost 2 years. How nature is quite resilient if you give it a chance, if there's no meddling. In many places, nature has made a remarkable comeback. So in this village, I was expecting 5 years, but they got it back in 3 months. And the next thing you know, the next village wanted to join in. So they all made an agreement among themselves. So I was behind the scene. So just helping them, sorting them out, setting the language, make it simple, what we can do, who's going to patrol, who's going to take care of the water conservation pool, right? So they were better at enforcing. They were arresting their own people because it's their common resource. They were pushing back villagers from outside the protected areas. Why? It's their livelihood. So give them a meaning. And that meaning was just food security. So I think in that sense, yes, find out what they have. And one more, if you want to talk about example of ecological knowledge or traditional knowledge, I talked to the shaman, talk about the magic, talk about the voodoos and whatnot. Well, they don't have voodoo, but something else. And use that, turn it around, combine it, link it one way or the other to conservation. And now I've got the shaman supporting my work, the elders supporting my work, and no one wants to go against the shaman. So great, yay.
Thank you very much. That
requires another 6 hours of discussion. Actually, there's a lot of things.
You're free to keep going once we stop streaming. It's
happy hour in Japan right now, right?
I want to go back and end with something also. Maybe I don't know if it's a lighter note, but maybe a positive thing. We had one final question from YouTube. So Nahoko, can I ask you to come back and ask that for us?
Okay. We don't have much time, but we have very nice question on YouTube. So it's about your best experience while doing your research on primate and conservation. So yeah, what is your best experience while doing your research on primates and conservation? So can you quickly answer this question, please?
That's very difficult because every experience is best. Even the worst experience is still the best.
I think the common answer is
but later on.
I
don't have one single best experience in that sense. So it's a very difficult question. I have to think, and probably we're going to take another 6 hours. But I think okay, let's try to narrow it down. I think as mentioned earlier, studying primates has taught me a lot about myself, how to be a better human. That's all. I think that's the best experience among the best, but just to make it very short.
Thank you.
They were my best teachers.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Dr. Zimbo, and thanks everyone here in Zoom and also on YouTube. There's a good group here and a lot of interesting and stimulating questions coming out of it. And I'm sure people could keep going ad infinitum here, I think, but we're going to have to close at least this session. And if anyone, well, I don't know, maybe Mike and maybe some others, if you want to stick around in Zoom for just a few more minutes, that's fine as well. But again, thanks everyone for joining. And I'd like to here close this International Primatology Lecture Series on past, present, and future perspectives of the field with Dr. Ramesh Boonratana. Thanks very much.